The radical fundamental principles of freedom, personal self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody. Welcome to Yaron Brook Show on it's Saturday, December 28th, almost at the end of 2024. It's pretty amazing. And indeed, this is our last AMA and panel for 2024. So thank you for joining me, and thank you to our panelists for being here. Let's see. Yesterday I was going to have a show, and then I had to use my computer for something else. Something that sucked up all the bandwidth. So I'll do a show tomorrow. So to make up for the one I didn't do yesterday. So tomorrow, we're going to talk about the MAGA Civil War. This is fun. I don't know if anybody's watching this, but Twitter is the most fun it's been since Twitter was invented over the last 48, 72 hours or so, as the racists show their face and Elon Musk discovers who he's been allied with. It's pretty funny to watch and depressing. Let's not forget that. All right. So that'll be, let's see. So we've got that on tomorrow. Monday we've got the immigration show on Monday, which fits beautifully with the MAGA Civil War. So we'll just take apart immigration and we'll cover everything just like I did with China. We'll do that in the evening on Monday. So that'll be a 6 p.m. East Coast time. And then we've got the big end of year show. So review of 2024, expectations for 2025, and the big fundraiser. And that'll be on 1 p.m. East Coast time on Tuesday, December 31st. And that's going to be a lot of fun. All right. So let's jump in with our panel. I see people are still joining, so I'll keep letting them in while we go. And we'll go a couple of rounds. We'll go around with the panel, and then I'll take super chat questions. So those of you who are listening on YouTube, watching on YouTube, who would like to ask questions, feel free to do that while I answer the questions from the panel. And we'll go back and forth. All right, let's start with Adam.
Thank you. I would like to point out the relation between the disminding that's going on in American schools as a result of having the world's worst philosophy of education and the fact that high tech needs people who can think, and they're only available as immigrants. And so high tech is in a panic now, but the long-term solution is not only opening up immigration, it's changing the philosophy of education in American schools.
Sure. But though, I think we should separate the two out, because the reality is that immigration should be more open, not because Americans are uneducated and therefore we can't fill the jobs, or we don't have enough entrepreneurs, but immigration should be open because people have a right to immigrate, and Americans have a right to employ whoever they want to employ. So immigration should be more open and more plentiful, just on a rights basis. Now, it is more urgent right now, because the reality is that we don't have, America itself is not producing, if you will, enough through its educational system, entrepreneurs and programmers and engineers and semiconductor engineers and so on, biotech engineers, to fill the demand of American companies, and therefore that is the urgency. But the reality of immigration is that there should be more of these immigrants, no matter, even if we improve our educational system dramatically, we should still open up our borders much more than they are today. But yes, we need to get rid of Dewey. We need to get rid of progressivism from our educational system. It's the one area where progressives have had unbelievable success, where they basically dominate, and education is American education is really, really, really bad and needs to be improved dramatically.
Now, the one person whom I'd like to point out has benefited from a much better educational system and is now the guy in charge of hardware at Apple. And I know that you are using the things that he led the design of, like all the latest iPhones and
Sure.
mini Mac and so on, the M4 processor. It's Johnny Srouji, who is an Israeli Arab, and
Yep.
he is the guy in charge of hardware at Apple.
Yeah, but yes, and the reality is that I'll talk about this on Monday. The percentage of tech entrepreneurs, the percentage of people in high important positions in the tech world who were beneficiaries of educational systems outside the United States is mind blowing. It really is. It really is dramatic. Including the CEOs of many of the large tech companies who are Indian, or the founders of many tech companies, who some of them are Israelis, some of them are European, some of them are Indian. But yes, the fact that other countries have better educational systems than ours is a good thing, because we get some of the people who graduate from those educational systems come to us, and bring their productive genius with them. Thank you, Adam.
And by the one more thing, those who accuse Israel of apartheid should keep in mind that it would not have been possible for Johnny Srouji to get the education he got and the opportunities to rise in the Apple labs in Israel if Israel was indeed some kind of segregated society.
Absolutely, no question about that. No question. Thank you, Adam. All right, Jennifer.
Do you think it's more common for people that especially are studying philosophy they're so afraid of being rationalistic that they end up being pragmatists, or do you think pragmatism is more common in general because people don't even try to be philosophical in the first place?
I think it's people don't try to be philosophical in the first place. I think that pragmatism is common, if I understand your question, common generally because people are distressed by the philosophy of the culture and they just give up on it. And in order to get anything done, they think they have to be pragmatic, because that's all because if they abide by the philosophy, they won't get anything done. If they abide by the philosophy, they'll spend their life sacrificing, or they'll spend their life miserable, and they don't want that. So they adopt pragmatism as a default, right? Particularly this is true of people in business. So I think the prevalence of pragmatism is particularly in America, is the American sense of life rebelling against altruism and unreason.
Yeah.
And it's sad because, of course, that kills them.
Yeah.
And they can't think. Thanks, Jennifer. All right, Emmett and Diane. Did I pronounce that right? Diane. Hey.
Hi. Happy holidays.
Christmas.
So when I was at Ocon, I had some conversations about about differences between Say and von Mises, and I was wondering if you could go into what the key differences are between the two and what the controversy is between picking one of them versus the other.
I didn't know there was a controversy. I don't think there should be a controversy. I think they're both great economists, and I think we should just leave it at that. In a sense, why does one have to pick? I think
what is the controversy between the two? if there is one?
I don't think there is one. I mean, I think there's somebody who gave a talk at an old OCon who over lionized, say, and in a different talk, overly criticized Mises.
Ah,
But other than that one person, I don't know if there's a controversy within objectivism. I have no idea if that controversy exists, right? I think they're both great economists. I think that Mises has a more Mises, as far as I know, wrote a lot more, has a lot more thought out, writing. He comes a lot later, so he benefits from the fact that he is now responding to the rise of socialism, the rise of statism in various forms, and more knowledge because just you get more data, right? As say, still relatively early in capitalism, so massive genius given that he's writing in the 19th century. Mises has the benefit of the entire 19th century and early 20th century, and benefit, you could call it, of seeing the disaster of socialism and fascism. So he sees them. You could argue that methodologically, at the root, Mises is flawed because he's a rationalist. He's got a Kantian kind of a perspective explicitly, although implicitly, he's obviously doing induction, and so I think he can't come to the conclusions he comes to through deductive Kantian stuff. So but he's explicitly a Kantian, and that's a problem. Whereas Say is probably more Aristotelian in his methodology, but and the founder of the Austrian school, Menger, is also Aristotelian in his methodology. He's much better methodologically than Mises. But Mises, given the volume of his work, given how right he is on so many things, I think Mises is the greatest economist who ever lived. And there's a sense in which that's not fair because he comes later and he has more to write about, more to comment on. There's central banking that Mises can comment on, which Say, I can't remember if Say writes about central banking, but central banking is very young in comparison. It's certainly not in the United States, and it's central banking is in the Netherlands and in England and maybe a few other places. And there's some experiments in France, but you haven't got the wide range of experimentation. So monetary theory, I think there's less. Business cycle theory Mises has. There's so much content in Mises. There's so many theoretical progress that he's made. And I wouldn't call Say a classical because classical is more what happens in the late 19th century, post Say. I wish they were more like Say. They're great, and I can see why people would prefer one over the other in different contexts. I don't think it's that important to rank them, but just to recognize that you've got two great economists in two different eras covering somewhat different areas, fields of economics, but both great.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. All right, Daniel.
Good morning. Good afternoon. You're still doing a fair bit of traveling, and I know you often gotten really good reception, especially places like Eastern Europe. How have your travels been? What's really great? What's really bad? Tell us a little bit. What's your summary of what's going on outside of the U.S. right now in places you're visiting?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I'm quite as enthusiastic as I was about many of these places as I was, let's say, I don't know, pre-COVID, or even more so looking back pre-Trump and pre-Bolsonaro, because I think what I'm observing is that a lot of the energy that used to be in Eastern Europe, let's say, and in South America, at least pre-Milei, a lot of the energy in those kind of places has been reoriented towards what we'll call the new right, towards kind of right populism, kind of right-wing nationalism. So a lot of Eastern Europe, which is very excited about free markets, pre-COVID, or pre-Trump, hard to tell exactly what's going on, but maybe it's pre-mass Muslim migration into Europe in 2015, 2016. A lot of things are happening, so it's hard to filter out what are the causal relationships. But a lot of that energy has gone into nationalism and anti-immigration and populism and central planning, but in a nationalist kind of way. So that's disappointing. It's disappointing that we couldn't have more of an impact on shaping those young people. So Brazil is a good example. Brazil was huge in terms of passion around free markets, and then Bolsonaro came to power, and I think a lot of that energy got sucked up by Bolsonaro and his kind of right-wing populism. And there's a lot less of it today in Brazil. Although I think the good news is that Milei is going to change things. That is, if Milei is successful, particularly if we look a year out, if Milei is successful, then I think a lot of that energy in Brazil and other places around Latin America will be reoriented around, again, free market ideas. The foundations are there. There are a lot of free market think tanks. Ayn Rand is quite well read in a lot of these places, in particular Brazil. Just huge numbers of people read Ayn Rand in Brazil, particularly young professionals, young business people read Ayn Rand. Of course, Argentina itself, there's a lot of interest. There's a lot of Ayn Rand. There's more and more openness to these ideas. And then we'll see about the rest of Asia, rest of South America, but I think there's going to be more interest in the rest of South America. I think the rest of the world is also looking on, and the disaffected young people who are not leftists are looking to see maybe the next cool thing will be, again, to be a free market person rather than a nationalist. The dynamics in Europe are different because the whole immigration situation, the fear of Muslims, and, well, they won't even call them Muslims, just fear of immigrants is big over there, and that is shaping kind of a nationalist agenda. So I'm not seeing, and it used to be very positive about the UK. I thought the UK had a chance to really do good things. It had a conservative party that was much more secular than the American Conservative Party, but it turned out that it was also a complete sellout and would not stand for anything. And so now you have Labour in power. The question is, will the Brits learn from that? I like the woman who runs the Conservative Party, Kimi Badenoch, but I fear that the British people are going to, again, go nationalist right direction rather than the free market pro-capitalist direction.
So you were pretty positive about China as well. I don't know if you've been back there.
That's right.
Has obviously been squashed.
Yeah, so I used to be much more optimistic about the world than I am today. So yeah, I used to be very excited about China up until 2018 when I had my first really negative experience there, and I haven't been back and won't be back after that. So basically, the think tanks that used to invite me have been shut down. There used to be a Hayek Society and a Rand Society, Ayn Rand Society, at Renmin University in Beijing. Those have been shut down. Many of those some of those professors lost their jobs. Some of them are still there, but keeping their head low. Some, I think, land up even in jail. A lot of people left. A lot of people are here in the U.S. A bookstore that I gave a talk at some point in Shanghai, which was considered a liberal bookstore, and it promoted classical liberal ideas. He had to flee China, and today lives in Florida. Just got I think his green card. So a lot of those Chinese have left, and the energy that I saw there, going back 20 years, really, a lot of that entrepreneurial energy, a lot of the pro-capitalism, even explicitly pro-capitalism, pro-Western, I think that's been beaten out of people, or at least they're hiding it now. And the authorities are doing everything they can to suppress and free speech, which you had a little bit of in China 8 years ago, is gone. So generally, I think the world is in worse condition since the early teens. The early teens were a time of optimism. We had the Tea Party in America. You had massive sales of Ayn Rand, book sales. You had China still liberalizing. You had much of Latin America and Eastern Europe looking towards free market solutions. There was a lot of respect for the free market around the world, and all of that seemed to have collapsed. Around the time Donald Trump was elected. I don't think it's all connected to him, but she got more serious about clamping down. Bolsonaro won in Brazil, and just generally attitudes towards free market got stomped on, and kind of nationalist sentiment rose. I think the immigration crisis in Europe was a big factor. I also think the 2008 financial crisis, with a lag, was a massive causal issue, because I think ultimately the people who blamed the financial crisis on capitalism won out. That is, their voices were louder and stronger, and basically they won out. So that by the time you get into the mid-teens, everybody's blaming the stagnation, the crisis in Greece, and the stagnation in the U.S. and in Europe on capitalism, because capitalism caused the great financial crisis. So it very much the inability to defend capitalism during 2008, 2009 by American and European intellectuals has had disastrous consequences. You could argue even the move away from capitalism by the Chinese is probably caused by 08, 09. Their conclusion capitalism causes this. We don't want capitalism. We need to move away from driving ourselves towards that. So
I think Trump is a consequence, not a driver of this. And
I think he makes it worse because he sucks energy towards it, right? Because if you're a young person and in 2015, you're all excited about, I don't know, free market ideas and going to free market. You can see it in Charlie Cook, right? Look at Charlie Cook and his whole movement, which was a pro-capitalist, pro-free market movement up until Trump got elected. And then Trump is like, whoa, Trump's exciting. He's a winner. He won. He's got this energy. He's got this pseudo self-esteem, call it. He's got this pseudo confidence. And, that's the winning bandwagon. Let's drop this free market stuff and let's jump on that bandwagon. And I could see with Charlie Cook, and of course, Charlie Cook took the whole Turning Point USA from a free market, founding fathers type organization to a 100% Trumpism, whatever Trump wants. That's what Turning Point USA is, to the point where they just did their big conference, and there was a standing ovation for Senek. Senek, the Senk-Ug, whatever his name is, the real leftist, the way out there leftist, because he's so anti-capitalism, and they're so anti-capitalism these days that they have sympathies more towards leftists than they would if they invited me to speak. I would have been booed off the stage. So, whereas in the past, I was invited to Turning Point USA big conferences because they thought we were compatible on the capitalism. So there clearly is an energy suck. You see it with intellectuals. So you see it think about the marketplace for intellectuals. So people go out and they get PhDs in, I don't know, political science, economics, and all these other things. And there's a period where, it looks like the smaller libertarian think tanks are thriving and booming, and that's where I should go. Now, I don't think that's how people think exactly about it, but it's a subtle incentive to move in that direction. And then Trump wins, and suddenly there's this whole other ecosystem that is created with money, and suddenly people say, how do we build a intellectual framework for Trumpism? and suddenly you get half a dozen think tanks, being created in Washington, D.C., all focused on Trumpism, call it. You get Heritage Foundation basically getting rid of all its free market people and shifting towards Trumpism. And now your incentive as you're rising up, if you want a job and if you want to be part of the future and if you want to be energized and all of this, is to go that direction. And again, it's a subtle influence. It's not that, let me see the market, I'll be anything, but you can see how it impacts people in subtle kind of ways. There's a whole intellectual shift that has happened over the last 10 years. There was just an article today on, what's her name? Barry Weiss's Free Press. Let me just see if I can find it. One second. It's just just shocking.
Yaron, while you look for that, do you think Milei is seen as Bolsonaro 2.0 or a different animal in Latin America?
I think the most sophisticated people see him as a completely different animal. He is not helping the cause by affiliating himself with God, why is Free Press weird like this? I have to go find it in my email, not here. Their website sucks. Okay, he is not helping the cause by affiliating himself with Trump and Bolsonaro. So he would make things a lot easier if he helped differentiate himself from them, but he is not. So that makes it problematic and harder. Here's the title. The title says it all, and the article is just. I've skimmed it. I haven't read it yet, but I will. The title is called "How Intellectuals Found God." Almost 150 years after Nietzsche said God is dead, some of our most important thinkers are getting religion. And it's basically an interview of what they're calling now, this is the name they're calling it, it's revealing as well. It's called The New Theists, a play off the New Atheists of, what is it, just 20 years ago. The New Atheists were the raging thing, they're the big thing. Religion was gone. And symbolic of this is Hersey Ali, but they've got a whole, they've got, of course, Jordan Peterson. They miscategorize a few things as they say the Peter Thiel just discovered God, but I've known Peter Thiel for over 10 years, and he was religious. He was a Catholic way back then, a weird kind of Catholic, a Catholic gay hedonist, but still a Catholic, believing Catholic. But they bring up Richard Dawkins, a cultural. So there's a sense in which, like, the dim hypothesis is playing out before our eyes, to the letter, to the sentence. There are sentences there where Leonard basically says, he predicts religion is going to take over America, religion, nationalism will take over America. And then he says, but it can't happen until the religious right has intellectuals, because it's intellectuals who drive movements. Right now, he says, this is 10 years ago, he's writing, the religious right has no intellectuals. Here they are, delivered on a silver platter to, the hypothesis is it's just stunning how it's playing out. So it's truly scary. But, here it is, so there's been this important shift over the last 10 years that is populist, religious, anti-free market, that is both, where Trump is both a symptom of and a accelerant of the shift. And that's I always said that was the big change of Trump, is that he accelerated this. He fueled it. He made it stronger and more substantial.
Thank you for that, I think. Obviously, it just makes your message more stark, more clear, right? I mean, we're not conservatives. We're not alt-right. We're not libertarians. You have something completely unique to say in the world.
It does. It's just that, on the it's just harder to get an audience because the audience is not interested. It's just harder to get in front of people. But look, I got in front of a lot more people in the mid-teens. Didn't help. So, I mean, it helped. Again, it's one mind at a time. So it helped individuals, but it didn't help shape the culture. So it's not like we're going to shape the culture, and we're still getting people, and people are still being changed. This last trip that I traveled, I spent some time in Argentina. There's a lot of interest in Argentina and Ayn Rand, and I think because of Milei in free markets, I spent some time in Portugal. Portugal is an up-and-coming, formerly poor country that is doing well economically, and there's a growing interest in these ideas in Portugal. And then I don't know. I was where else was I? That's interesting. Norway's always attracted a lot of objectivists, for whatever reason. And Australia is there are quite a few people in Australia interested in objectivism. Quite a few young people. Again, there were some politicians who attended our conference there, and the politicians were terrible. They were right-wing nationalists who were confused about everything. From economics to just raw, ugly nationalism, which borders on racism. So there are good people in Australia. So there are good people everywhere. There's a good group in Japan. Japan is kind of interesting. It's just an interesting place. They don't have kind of the crazy left, and they don't have the crazy right because they've done that, right? They did that a long time ago, and so I don't have a good sense of where Japan is and what most people in Japan think, but it is an interesting place. So we keep at it.
Very good. Thank you for the update.
Thanks, Daniel. All right, Jacob.
Yep, I was reading an article on the ports and the shipping containers that are mostly produced in China or for the automation. And in the article, they were saying they had undetected movements that weren't initiated locally by the port. So it was thought that there was some outside influence, maybe someone hacking into it, or the Chinese government seeing if they could move the port themselves. As someone that works in manufacturing, we have different relationships with vendors where one, we just buy the equipment and we never talked with the vendor again. Then you have other relationships where you're in constant communication, or maybe if like a breakdown happens, the vendor comes on site and works on it. And for this issue of unloading, I was trying to apply your framework for national security, but it didn't really work because you can't realistically embargo the company or say, hey, we're not going to buy them, because then an individual could go work at another software manufacturing firm that could help debug the system. So then that's out. But then you can't inspect the code, like require national security to inspect the code on any new purchases, because then you could alter the code. So I was kind of at a loss on how to think through this issue and whether it is a national security issue or where to go from there.
Yeah, I mean, if it turns out that the Chinese government has access to these cranes or these loading and unloading facilities, and certainly that could be perceived as a national security issue, particularly if we ever go to war with China, that certainly can be a national security issue. Then there are two options that can be presented. One is the U.S. government can say, you cannot buy the software anymore. You have to find other sources of the software. They can be somewhere else, but they can't be Chinese. And you're gonna have to find it elsewhere. And it's true that other software might have these breaches as well that theoretically could be used by the Chinese, but it's less likely. And again, you'd have to inspect and observe and try to make sure that they didn't exist. And then or the alternative would be, and this is something that I hope is being worked on, but who knows? And that is for the NSA basically to provide a solution. That is for NSA to provide some way, some piece of software. And I know nothing about these things, so who knows if this is even possible, that basically makes it impossible for the Chinese to control certain types of assets. That is that you put it in between your machine and whoever's and the internet or the communication channel that the Chinese are using to get in there, and it basically blocks it.
Yeah. So like for our company, if you have a breakdown that you can't solve, maybe something locks up, a bearing seizes, motor happens, you may call in the vendor, and then I think what they were thinking in the article is the vendor came by, then they just had a USB stick. They were by themselves for 2 minutes and plugged in a USB stick. And then that's how they gained access to it. So you'd have to have constant visibility to the ports, like the USB ports or any functionality, then hacking. Then you would have to identify who the individuals are and then ban them from coming to the US, because you could have a national that goes to Europe and then they work at a software company for 10 years and then they get paid $50,000 to plug in a USB port.
I mean, stopping sabotage is very, very hard, but it's what the NSA and what the intelligence agencies are there to do. The FBI is there to do, and this is their job, and this is what they should be doing. Maybe they can stop the war on drugs and focus more resources on stopping sabotage of American companies by Chinese spies. There's also a point where it becomes an act of war, and the United States just has to say to the Chinese, if you continue doing this stuff, and I would include hacking, for example, as part of this, if you continue doing this stuff, then we will completely embargo you. That is, we will shut down all trade with China. That is, we will declare you an official enemy of the United States, and we will shut you down. At some point, the United States has to draw a line in the sand for this kind of sabotage and this kind of spying. And where that line is, I'd have to have a lot more intelligence, information in order to know where that line is. But there have to be ways in which the intelligence community can help companies in sensitive places deal with these kind of threats.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
As you said, it could be a German company, but the Chinese have infiltrated the German company, and they've got a guy working at the German company, a German software, but they still can hack that. I mean, this is what spies do all the time, right? They use cover companies, they use cover stuff in order to infiltrate. Look at what the Israelis did to the Hezbollah beepers, right? They set up a whole company in Europe pretending to be a European company and sold them beepers with explosives inside. I mean, unbelievably cool. But also, once you think about it, well, anybody could do that. And if anybody can do that, when your company is buying equipment from Germany, it might be Chinese equipment with Chinese bugs in it. So, there's a limit to how much you can stop this stuff, but there's also an importance to trying to stop it. And the question is our intelligence services, is the FBI focused enough on trying to stop these kind of things? And I don't know what the answer to that is. Thanks, Jacob. Ian.
Hey, Yaron. So a while ago, you and I had a disagreement via chat about venture capitalism, and I wanted to just kind of explain my thoughts and get your thought, which is that my criticism was about people giving J.D. Vance credit because he was a venture capitalist. And my point wasn't that venture capitalists are bad or anything like that. I know I've even met some of the greats like John Doerr, who are obvious giants and huge contributors in many ways, and actually funds the company I work at. So it's not about that. But what I've seen in Silicon Valley, and I've been here since before the dot-com boom, is that there's been multiple kind of gold rushes in Silicon Valley. And the latest due to, the zero interest rates and all the crypto stuff and things like that. And what that brings in is it brings in bad actors, right? And they infiltrate every field that they can get into. And they are there just to make money through hype, do what they can, and for a while you saw this in the 16th clone company of DoorDash. They're not adding anything new to anybody, but they're just there to try and hype up a stock and then sell it on to the next investor. And the same thing with crypto, which 90%, and I think that's generous, of crypto is scam in one way or another. And these people are making tons of money off it. And so, I refuse to give somebody like JD Vance credit just because he put venture capitalism on his resume, unless somebody can say to me, okay, these are the companies he funded and these are the good, and these were good companies and things like that. So like, I just don't want people to get credit for something that is a good thing. And it's the same thing with like Elon Musk. People say Elon Musk is John Galt, and Elon Musk is a genius in production in a lot of other ways, but he's much more Gail Wynand at best and Robert Stadler at worst than he is John Galt. But anyways,
Yeah, I mean,
your
look,
thoughts.
So you have to give Elon Musk credit where credit is due and criticize him where criticism is due. And the same with JD Vance. And the fact that JD Vance worked as a venture capitalist and worked at a successful venture capital firm, so he didn't work at just a random venture capitalist. It's a firm we know, and it's a firm that's done well, and it's a firm whose founder still respects JD Vance. Now, maybe that has nothing to do with his performance as a venture capitalist. I don't know, but some credit is due for the fact that he worked at a productive as a venture capitalist. He's also smart. He also wrote a decent book. There's a lot of good things about JD Vance, and then he changed his philosophy, and he completely sold out, or he discovered a new philosophy that's more true to what he is. And he's completely corrupt today. So I don't see any contradiction between saying somebody worked at a firm that I respect. I respect Peter Thiel's venture capital firm. I have a lot of doubts about Peter Thiel, but Peter Thiel's venture capital firm has done, has invested in a lot of good companies and has an incredible track record. And JD Vance was part of that. Good for him. That's a plus. Now, it's true that venture capitalists get caught up in the hype. They certainly do that with every round. Partially, it's even good firms are afraid to get locked out of huge returns that come from certain winners, and in certain fields. There are venture capital funds that come just for the hype, but then they don't last very long. They survive a couple of funds. Maybe they have one home run, and then they raise another fund off of that. But then if they're not good, they die pretty quickly. The guys who stick around have done good work, and that doesn't mean they haven't had some of the biggest. I invested in 1998 or 9. I co-invested, not my money, but an investor's money, with Sequoia, one of the greatest venture capitalists of all time, right? With Sequoia, and the company started by the son of one of the founders of Sequoia. And it was one of the biggest duds in all of Silicon Valley history. The company went through $68 million, which seems like nothing today, but in those days was a lot of money, in 9 months, and went bankrupt, right? And I lost almost everything, although I think we were smart enough to hedge our investment. But anyway, that's a separate story. But and that was Sequoia. And Sequoia, does that periodically, but it also invests in in a lot of home runs. So, and it's not chance. There's some skill there, and there's once in a while they do something really stupid. And its stupidity always is much more evident ex post than so I agree with you on crypto, probably. I still don't quite understand 10 years into crypto where exactly the value added is, and who's gaining the value added. It's a many $1 trillion industry, and yet valuations, and then where's the economic value added is not clear. What service are they making more efficient? What product are they making better? I have no idea. Everybody tells me it's coming, that the potential will be realized any day now. I'm still waiting. So we will see about crypto. But yeah, and you could say Mark Andreessen is capitalizing off of crypto and everything. He's making a lot of money, but he's also invested in a lot of good companies before that, and he's made a lot of money. Probably in investments I would have thought was stupid, because if somebody had come to me with the idea of eBay, I remember eBay because it's from my days in Silicon Valley. I would have said, this is stupid, classified ads on the internet. Nobody should invest in this. And it's one of the what's his name? I forget the name of the venture capital fund, but it was one of the best investments ever that anybody ever made in terms of just the sheer return they made on the investment. So what do I know? These guys are good at it, and they keep making money. The good funds, finance professionals have looked at the funds over and over again. Whereas with mutual funds, past performance does not reflect future performance. That is, good past mutual funds don't do well in the future. With venture capital, past does reflect the future. That is, funds that do well, that have done well in the past, will do well in the future, at least. That's true of the past. So there's something there. There's something that they have. Partially it's deal flow. Maybe it's more deal flow than anything else. It's hard to tell what the comparative advantage is, but it's there. So I give people credit for what I think is good, but it doesn't change the fact that I think J.D. Vance is probably the most dangerous politician in America today, and I've said that many times. So partially because he's smart.
Yeah, thanks. And I've actually got to drop off, but when you visit San Francisco, make sure you download the Waymo app and give the self-driving taxis a car.
Oh, that's right. I'm going to be in San Francisco.
Because it's fun.
Yeah, that'll be fun. Cool. Thanks, Ian. Where are we here? Ryan.
Hi, hello everyone. I just wanted to test an observation with you. So, for about 7 or 8 years now, I've watched as the Daily Wire and Ben Shapiro have gone from an independent organization to a corrupt kind of sellout organization. And that's kind of happened very slowly over time. And just recently, I was checking my free press feed from Barry Weiss, and I'm being told that I should care that the Jews wrote my favorite Christmas carols. And they did an article on Dominion, and they're promoting the idea that America was only possible because of Christianity. So I'm kind of watching the same trend happen as a media organization gets bigger and they need to grow. They basically get dominated by whatever the cultural trends are and have to sort of play into that. So I'm expecting Barry Weiss within 24 months to fire people for wrong speak or something like that to happen. So it's a little discouraging, I guess. But then
can I just say something about wrong speak? I
Yeah.
think people should be fired for wrong speak, right? So if you run an organization like the New York Times and it's woke, and everybody in the organization is woke and somebody's not, it's okay to fire them. You're a woke organization. That's who you are. And Barry Weiss has a particular philosophy, a particular view of the world, agree with it or disagree with it. Once people start diverging from that, you'll fire them. And I wish they just admit it. And look at Elon Musk, right? I'll talk about this tomorrow. But Elon Musk said, we're a free speech platform. You can say anything you want on this platform. And then over the last 72 hours, people have been criticizing his position on what do you call it? On H-1Bs. And he has taken their blue check mark away, and he's taken out all kinds of privileges away from, these are people on the far right that have criticized him because they're criticizing him. So everybody has to have standards, and people who don't meet the standards are going to be fired.
So my issue is that when you start an organization and your goal is to seek the truth,
Yeah.
it's a little funny. Now, the parallel I'm drawing, though, and what's interesting to me is I look at an organization like ARI, who I consider to be uncompromising, and I've heard it said. And so it kind of confirms to me that in order for ARI to change the culture, you can't do it through media, right? Because it will end up like you have to change the culture at the ground floor through education and you're not going to do it through YouTube videos, right? Because in order to get the reach you want, you end up having to compromise your principles. Do you think that's correct?
I don't think that's, I think, yes. I mean, ultimately it has to be education, but I don't think for the reason you say. So let's think this through. So the reason they all, so this is the question: why do they all compromise their principles? And you're kind of arguing that the market demands it, that the market, it forces them to compromise. And my argument is, I would argue no, that's not true. That they never had principles to begin with, or their principles were weak and unrelated to reality, unconnected to reality. So what were Ben Shapiro's principles? I mean, ultimately, his only principle that he is committed to is his commitment to religiosity. And because he was committed to religiosity, he hired a bunch of religious Christians because he thought that'll be all the same, right? So he hired, I forget their names, right? All these guys who are all religious Christians, every single one of them. And sometimes those religious Christians go off the reservation, like Candace Owen, and he has to fire them. But as long as they stay within a certain respectability, particularly if they're not anti-Semitic or not anti-Semitic explicitly, then he tolerates them because he doesn't have really any other principles, not that guided the Daily Wire Plus. Maybe he personally had some principles, but not the Daily Wire. And then even his principles. What were his principles? Maybe one of them was become a dominant voice in the Republican Party. Maybe that was a principle. I don't know. Well, he succeeded in that by selling himself out. So I don't think they had philosophical principles. And say with Barry Weiss, what was the principle that Barry Weiss had? I don't believe in woke. I'm anti-woke. What am I for? Kind of pursue truth, but I can't really define what truth means. And I don't know where truth comes from because I'm still a religious Jew, a little bit at least. And my friends, and then I'm anti-woke, so I hate woke. But then all the people who I affiliate with who are anti-woke, I hate woke, all Christians, and they're all religious. So maybe there's something good about religion because it makes you anti-woke. But what's the principle? Where's the flaw? Did Barry Weiss ever have a philosophy? Did she have a philosophical grounding? No. So I would argue that they have drifted from their past positions, maybe, because they never had a founding grounded philosophy. If the Einstein Institute founded a Daily Wire-like channel, then it would never be big, or it won't be big for many decades. But it would never drift because it would have founding principles. It would have a philosophy. It would say, separation of state from economics. Not sometimes, not maybe, not when it's convenient, not when it suits the national interest, whatever the hell that is, the common good. No, but that's a principle. And that's just the way it is. Reason, never sacrifice. Now, not to say that there won't be controversies, that there won't be things that are said there that, the disputes even within the Institute about, but there is a founding philosophy. There are founding principles, real principles. And I don't think any of these other organizations have those. And
I think the
used to be about the truth, but they never had real grounded principles. So when woke, as the left became more dominant, the New York Times became more and more and more leftist. Not because they abandoned principles, but because they never really had any.
The common thread seems to be that collectivism is good, and that kind of underpins all of the stories. Yeah.
Once you accept collectivism and altruism, then it's just a question. You either go collectivist left, collectivist right, but so even somebody like Ben Shapiro, who for a while pretended to be a real individualist, but in the end, religion doesn't really allow you to be a real individualist. And and altruism doesn't allow you to be a real individualist. And he was advocating for sacrifice at a personal level. And he was arguing against self-interest on a personal level. And once you accept those ideas, then you're going to drift towards collectivism. You're going to drift away from individualism. So again, what does it mean to have principles, and how firmly do you hold them, and how clear are they in your own mind?
Thank you.
Those are the kind of issues that I think you'd have to deal with.
Thanks.
All right, Alejandro.
Hello. So I guess continuing on our conversation last month, it seems to me, if I can make a criticism, that objectivism kind of doesn't acknowledge the role of luck in society. So for example, if you say that you shouldn't tax someone to pay for, I guess, healthcare, isn't the only reason you can make that claim is because you were lucky in the first place, and that you were lucky, and now you're in a position to make that claim, like you didn't get sick. And so it seems that kind of the victims of this kind of biological coercion, how would you put it? It seems to be chosen on random, when I think society could be organized on reason, would choose it more, kind of distribute it more equally or something like that. Any comments?
Oh, God. Biological coercion. I love that term. That is amazing. Biology has coerced you. That is bizarre, right? So coercion can only be inflicted by another human being. That is what coercion means. It means being coerced by a human being or a human institution. Biology doesn't coerce you. You are born with particular genes and DNA. That is true. That's not luck. Luck is a concept that does not apply to the distribution of your genes in your body. There's no lottery before you were born. There's no a blackjack table, or what do you call it, roulette wheel that determines your DNA. It just gets determined. Luck only applies once you're alive, once you have a particular DNA, and then you can be lucky or not lucky, whatever the hell that means. It's not even clear what that term means to human life. But your genes are what they are. You're born with them. That's it. That's the starting point. There is no starting point like what's his name? The Harvard professor, John Rawls. It has a starting point before you're born. There's no such thing as a starting point before you have an identity. Your identity starts from when you're born, so you have a particular genetic makeup. And then it's also true that you're born to particular parents. Okay, that's who you're born to. That's reality. It's not luck. It's just reality. It just is what it is. Some of us are born to good parents. Some of us are born to bad parents. It is what it is. And then, of course, it's what you make of all that. How you deal with the genes that you have and how you deal with the parents that you actually have that will determine whether you're a good person or not good person, a bad person, even an evil person. So you get to make decisions about those kind of things. And, some luck is involved in one's life, but luck is a tiny little fraction as compared to what you do with the talents, the reality that you have around you, how you handle it, how you deal with it. So, metaphysically, there's no such thing out there as luck that applies to your particular DNA. It is what it is. This is the primacy of existence, according to Ayn Rand. Reality is what it is. Your reality, who you are, is just who you are. And now deal with it. Now deal with that reality. That's your job as a human being. And the fact that you were born with genes that are less good than mine does not give you any right to my stuff, does not give you any right to what I have done with my life, does not give you a right to coerce me, to use force against me. It does not give you a right to enslave me to whatever your needs happen to be. I'm an individual human being. You're an individual human being. We have different genetic makeup. Fine. Not only that, but if I indeed am more talented than you significantly, then you're a massive beneficiary of my talent. That is, my talent will produce goods that will and all kinds of values, including in Ayn Rand's case, a whole philosophy that'll make your life better if you make the right kind of decisions about how to use it and how to apply it. This is Ayn Rand's whole idea of pyramid of ability. The people who are so-called unlucky with not so good genes massively benefit from the people who've made a good life for themselves, massively benefit from them, disproportionately so. So if we're all allowed to be free, that is, if you stop burdening the people with ability with all kinds of duties and constraints where people can coerce them in a variety of different ways, then you lose those benefits. You're actually, the weaker party is actually worse off. So, for example, right now, all the welfare beneficiaries over the last 50 years that have gotten welfare are worse off because they got welfare. They're worse off economically as compared to a world in which there's no welfare and a world in which producers are left free to produce. We are all so much richer, including the welfare recipients, because of the freedom the great producers have. So at every level, the argument is wrong. Let's see, I got some comments here. What were they? Yeah, I mean, the whole notion of luck is predicated on determinism, as if your genes determine who you are. The whole notion of, but it just doesn't metaphysically apply. There's no, random distribution beforehand. There is what it is. This particular sperm enters this particular egg.
Yaron,
Yeah.
how is this related to the proponents of equity saying that, people need to start out at the same place, or we need to like even out the starting
This is exactly the argument that John Rawls makes. He makes the argument that you are not morally or any other way responsible for your success because you're determined by your genes and you're determined by your environment, both of which you have no control over before you're born. And if you could make a decision before you're born on what kind of society you would want to be born into, because you don't know what parents you will have and what genes you will have, you will want to be born into an egalitarian society, a society in which the worse off are never made worse, because you might be one of those worse off. Now, there's so many things wrong with Rawls' analysis, but the primary thing that's wrong with Rawls' analysis, first of all, I don't think that's what you would make. That's the kind of decision you would make. But the worst thing about Rawls' analysis is it's metaphysically crazy, right? You're assuming we have a nature before we have a nature, before we exist, without any genes, without any environment, without anything, without any choices, without us being us, and yet we can make decisions beforehand. It's just the whole thing is a fantastical mind game. It's sophistry at its worst, and it is corrupted philosophy and moral thinking since he wrote that book. And Ayn Rand was unbelievably her article about Rawls is so spot on. It's almost scary how prophetic she was in terms of understanding the impact of that book would have on intellectual life. All right, thanks, Alejandro. To be continued, I guess. All right, Andrew, you showed up late.
I know. I assumed it was the 2 p.m. starting time. So Leonard Peikoff, I'm listening to his Understanding Objectivism course.
Yep.
And he talks about objectivist struggles with rationalism and his own struggles with rationalism.
Yep.
And what do you think? Do you think that is a function like that a lot of objectivists suffer from that because it's just a widespread, state that exists in the human population and objectivists are human and therefore a lot of them are rationalists? Or do you think there's something about the philosophy that kind of attracts or creates that rationalism?
Oh, I've talked about this many times. I think it's the second. I think it's true of any young people who are engaged in philosophy, core philosophy, and including objectivism. That is, when you are young, you know very little about the world. You have very little empirical evidence, empirical experience, data about the actual world out there. And what happens is you read something like Ayn Rand, in particular Ayn Rand, and suddenly, in a sense, the truth, capital T, you have downloaded the truth. And you just have it. It's accessible to you, right? Atlas Shrugged, the truth is just there. And yet you haven't gone through the process of validating it because it's a novel. Partially you've embraced it as truth, partially because emotionally you experience as such. And so you haven't validated it, and yet it's there, and then it's going to take you a while to validate it. But you don't know that because you're young and you don't understand how philosophy works and how philosophy works vis-a-vis your subconscious and your life. And in the meantime, you're trying to deal with it, and the only thing you can handle, because you don't have enough of the concretes, is at the abstract level. You deal with it at that level. So I don't know almost any young objectivist who's not rationalistic. Almost all young objectivists are rationalistic to some extent. And I think to some extent it's inevitable, just because to concretize everything, to make it your own, to integrate it properly into you, takes time. And during that time, you're not going to say, okay, I'm in training right now. This is why Ayn Rand encouraged people to call themselves students of objectivism, not objectivists. Because most people don't say, okay, I'm a student right now. I'm not sure exactly. I'm working on my objectivism. No, you just read Atlas Shrugged and it's true. And you're convinced of it. And you're not going to convince the world. And you don't have the tools to do it. You don't have the ability to do it. But you don't know that because you don't have any objectivity about yourself. It's very hard to gain that objectivity about yourself. So I think it's a way to handle this amazing philosophy you have just received, as you work to integrate it and to make it real and to confirm it and to validate it in your own mind, which takes time.
Yeah.
Rationalism is the way you cope.
I mean, Leonard Peikoff is just so he emphasizes it so heavily that even if you don't think you're rationalistic,
Yep.
you got to check your premises if somebody like that, who suffered from it in himself, is insistent that just you got to bring yourself down to reality. You have to connect with reality.
Almost
directly.
Everybody's rationalistic. I mean, the alternative is to be empiricist, but there are many more rationalists and objectivists than empiricists. It's so different than anything else out there, than everything we've taught and everything else that is in the culture. It's very difficult suddenly to hold on to something that's so new, so different, so radical.
Yep. Thanks.
Yep. All right. Let's go to the super chat. Thank you to all the super chatters. Yeah, I got a bunch of $50 questions today. I don't know. Some days you guys just wake up and decide to do $50. It's great. All right, let's do Evan. Even without a Fed, so long as the US dollar exists, wouldn't some basic regulations be required to preempt foreign central banks from printing digital US dollars? Wow. I mean, okay, so how does that even happen? I don't think that's regulation. That is anti-fraud laws, or ways in which to be able to identify what is a real dollar and what is a non-real dollar. That is, it's basically anti-fraud. You have to be able to differentiate, even at the electronic level, either at the digital level, what is the right dollar. Now, if you don't have a central bank, who is printing the dollars? The only people who can print the dollars with no central bank. Now, I'm assuming we haven't just replaced the central bank with the Treasury, which is a lot of people would like to do, just replace it with the Treasury. We're talking about doing away with the central bank and therefore private banking, and therefore Banks are actually issuing the currency. And therefore, every bank is going to have to make sure that its particular digital currency, US dollar, was printed by it. That some other bank can't print. So Citibank can't print Chase dollars, and Chase can't print Citibank dollars. And of course, the Bank of China can't print either one of those dollars. Maybe this is a good place to use crypto. I don't know enough about crypto, but maybe this is a good place to be able to make clear what what is a Citi dollar and what is a Chase dollar. I don't know enough about this, but there has to be a way. In the old days, there were particular ways in which the dollar bill was constructed that make it very, very difficult to, what do you call it? Copy. Copy is a simple word. I know there's a better word for that. But so there has to be a way to do that digitally. And that will apply to cross banks. And that will certainly apply across countries. There have been attempts, for example, by the government of Iran and other players over the years, counterfeit. There's the word. I knew it was there somewhere in my subconscious. Counterfeit, where they try to counterfeit paper dollars, not digital dollars, but paper dollars. And many of those efforts were quite successful. They got pretty sophisticated. And the people who actually make the dollar, right, the people who print the dollars, it's really sophisticated technology to keep up with the counterfeiting. There's an objectivist who owns the company that prints Canadian money. All money in Canada is printed by his company. And he talks about how high tech they are and how complex it is to print just the bill in order to prevent counterfeiting. So it's a whole industry or a whole. All right, let's see. Michael, also thank you for the 50. Is part of Kant's doing not just a nihilistic attack on values, but an overall unseriousness towards values and life itself that permeates the culture? If nothing matters, why focus your mind? Why so serious, as the Joker from Batman says? Yeah, I mean, I feel bad about, I don't feel bad. I feel weird about, okay, everything is Kant. It's too rationalistic because the steps are complicated, right? We have to understand the steps and how it happens. So if you undermine reason, which is what Kant ultimately does, what Kant does is undermine reason and individual values. If you undermine those two things, what results is skepticism and cynicism. And skeptics and cynics, why so serious? Why focus? Why make the effort? Why try? It's like if you're a determinist, right? If it's all about the luck of the gene pool, then, I just am what I am. Give me stuff because I drew the short straw. Like if you go to Vegas and you're unlucky in Vegas, does that mean that I have to help you out? Like, I don't get, even if it is luck, right? Why does the unlucky have some moral claim against the lucky? Like we don't do that in Vegas. So why would we do that in life? We don't do that in anything really. I see where does morality derive from luck? I don't see the relationship between morality and luck at all. But anyway, so yes, the cynicism and skepticism that derive from the attack on reason and values, the detachment of reason from reality and values from you as an individual, leads to an unserious approach to reality and leads to skepticism and cynicism. Okay, James, did you see Milei meeting with Elon Musk? There could be real tension in the Trump administration between free market techies and fascist nationalists. Perhaps we'll get some policies from each, some protectionist combined with deregulation of tech. I did not see the meeting between Milei and Elon Musk, but I have been following the just vicious fighting that's going on between the tech bros and the nationalist morons on Twitter, on X. And one of the things that comes out, and I'll talk about this tomorrow, is the extent to which Elon Musk is ultimately a pragmatist and how sad it is to watch him struggle with not having any principles. he kind of flirts with principles and then has to backtrack away from them. And it's just so frustrating because he's obviously brilliant, genius, whatever, unbelievable, and so right and so smart on certain things. But he can't latch onto principle and keep it because he's not a principled thinker when it comes to anything but I guess his business. So there's going to be a huge battle within the Trump administration. And it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. And JD Vance is going to be a key player in it because JD Vance, in a sense, has a foot in both worlds. He has an affiliation with the techies, but is completely bought into the nationalist stuff. I think he will tilt it towards the nationalist. I think that's where his real principles, if you want to call it, principles are, not with the techies, not with the free market techies. But it is going to be interesting to see how it plays out in the push and pull of that. Maybe some good things will happen, maybe not. It'll depend on how Trump deals with the fist fight that is happening. And the first test is right now with this H-1B stuff. It is fascinating to watch. And J.D. Vance, of course, is not a racist, so that's one thing. And, that differentiates him for some of these crazy nationalists, that they are pure racists. He is not. He's in a funny kind of coincidence. A lot of this erupted because of the hatred of MAGA for Indians, people of Indian descent. And yet J.D. Vance is married to an Indian woman, right? And the whole thing is...
You remember when Ann Coulter said,
yes,
directly told Vivek that she wouldn't vote for him because he
wouldn't vote.
She was ahead of the movement.
She could never vote for him. The first thing she said to him when he interviewed her on his podcast was, I liked a lot of what you said, but I couldn't vote for you because you're an Indian. No, and she's always ahead of the movement. She is the ultimate nationalist, racist, xenophobe. And Ann Coulter's horrible, awful, disgusting. And J.D. Vance's wife is Indian. By the way, Donald Trump's wife came in on an H-1B3, I think, as a model. There's a special H-1B for models. So that's interesting. So, there's just a lot of fun stuff. I mean, I'm just enjoying it. I just think it's a blast. So the whole show, tomorrow's show will be on this because there's so many. And then Nikki Haley showed herself to be much worse than I thought she was. She sided with these xenophobic nationalists, even though she's an Indian of Indian descent. So it just shows you that where you descend from doesn't determine what your positions are going to be, because she just went with the white nationalist racists, in her positioning on the whole H-1B debate. So it's just fascinating to watch. Fascinating. And then Bannon came in, and what's his name? The conspiracy theory guy. Anyway, they've all opined on this. So I don't know what we're going to get at the end of the day. I do think we'll get some deregulation, particularly in energy and some other places where Trump has put decent people at the head of, Musk and Vivek will make recommendations about government cutting spending, but my guess is most of them will be ignored. My guess is that at the end of Trump's term, the U.S. government will be bigger than at the beginning of his term in terms of dollars spent, even adjusted for inflation. Alex Jones came in and even opined on this. And the alliances are fascinating. Who's aligned with who? It's just, yeah.
The funniest end fight for me was over Wegovy and Elon Musk. That one was just hilarious.
Was good too. I talked about that, on the show on Thursday, that he came up for GLP-1s, drugs, and of course RFK is super against, and so there's going to be a battle there between, the whole tech bro thing is about enhancing with drugs and taking all kinds of drugs to enhance oneself. It's not about eating natural and being natural and taking only natural supplements. It's about using drugs to enhance yourself. And there's a conflict between them and RFK is going to be fascinating as well. All right, Russell, can you explain the difference between being rational and rationalization? Yes, being rational is going by reality. Rational means the relationship between your thinking, your ideas, and the facts of reality. Basing what you think and your thought process on facts, on reality, on what exists out there. Rationalization is you have a conclusion and now you form abstract arguments in order to justify it that are detached from the facts of reality. That is, that they are floating abstractions. They are floating. To be a rationalist means that your arguments are ultimately detached from the concretes and the facts of reality. They appear deductively true, but in deduction, if you make assumptions that are not connected to reality, the deduction is useless, right? So the difference is how connected your argument is to the facts of reality. All right, we'll do 4 of these questions and then we'll go to the panel again. Hopper Campbell, if pseudo self-esteem has no value, why do people seek it? If most provide some high, or maybe it's not that pseudo. I think it provides some high, but that's not self-esteem. Self-esteem doesn't provide you with a high. It provides you with a constant sense of worth, a constant feeling of value, a constant state of being. Pseudo self-esteem just provides you with a high. I screwed that person. Everybody loves me. Everybody applauded. Everybody thought I was funny. Whatever that happens to be, that's a high. You can get highs in lots of different ways. And the high is not necessarily a value. It's what's sustainable. The self-esteem, the happiness, which is a value. And that cannot be achieved through the pseudo self-esteem. But they seek it because it gives them a fake, temporary, momentary glimpse of what self-esteem might be like. All right. Clark, the fact that objectivism has been around for a while and has only had scattered and inconsistent impact here and there suggests fascist collectivism is too big a wave to push back on in this stage of mankind's development. That is quite possibly true. But what is the alternative, right? So let's all dig a hole somewhere and bury ourselves and detach ourselves from the world around us and not comment on it and not fight it. Or you don't know what the future holds. You don't know what choices people are going to make tomorrow or in 5 years or in 10 years and 20, 30 years, depending on your time horizon. And, there's a certain value to the fight itself. You've got to keep going. So you don't abandon a philosophy that makes your life better because it's not going to win. And you don't abandon arguing for it because the probability of it winning is very, very low. Again, I think Leonard has this thing in the dim hypothesis towards the end where, if you see a loved one that's about to run themselves off of a cliff by accident, they're not doing it on purpose, but you're never going to make it in time to save them. Does that mean you just sit back and say, oh, okay, they're going to fall off a cliff? Or you start crying and bawling and so on? Or do you run and try to save them anyway? Just on the freaky chance that somehow you can shout them and they hear you and prevent them from going off the cliff. And then, of course, there is the marginal benefit you're making and the big benefit you're making in individual human life. So I'm not sure what different life we would lead if we accepted your premise that we can't win right now. Because I accept your premise. We cannot win right now. It's not changing anything in the way I live. Shazbad, in my experience, there's no such thing as luck. Obi-Wan Kenobi. Yes, I mean, first of all, there's no such thing as luck because most things that we attribute to luck are caused by something. We just don't have the tools to measure the cause and to figure out the cause. Even the roulette wheel is not luck. The laws of physics are at work. We just don't know. We don't have the ability to accumulate the data to figure out exactly where the ball will fall. So luck is a proxy for, we don't know all the forces involved, or we can't measure it right now. But there is luck in the sense that things do happen that you can't attribute a direct causal link to. And then not in your control or not in your direct control. Evans says, you mentioned that you want the Fed phased out in 3 years. I imagined that meaning merely an end to monetary policy specifically. Do you mean something like buying out all dollars and dollar-denominated debt, private and public? I mean the replacement of all dollars with private money. And that, basically the government debt be converted from dollar denomination into private money denomination. Or if we go on a gold standard, which I think is the first thing we should go on, and then have competition and see if we could outcompete gold, go make all government debt denominated in gold. That is converted. After 3 years, convert all government debt to gold. And that is, you owe $1,000 worth of gold, right, to your bondholders. It means the dissolution of the Fed, the closing of the Fed, and the conversion of all money to private money. So there will be a period in which, I haven't gone through the steps, but one of the steps is going on a gold standard. And that step will require you to basically convert all paper currency today to gold-backed currency. And then that gold-backed currency, then the gold is then distributed to the banks based on what they bring to the Federal Reserve and hand in. And that requires a whole process, but it requires getting to a price that will clear the gold reserves that the Fed has with the dollars denominated that have in the market. It's not a simple process, but that's why it needs to take 3 years, maybe 4 years, maybe 5 years. I don't know, but you'd have to go to gold first, then to private banking. And I don't think it's that hard to do. It's just you have to think it through. All right, let's do a panel. Let's see, Adam.
Okay, I'm glad that luck was mentioned because it was a popular theme in American 19th century literature, the Horatio Alger story, where a person overcomes bad luck. And it's still a very prevalent theme in Korean TV series. There are two in particular that I think are remarkably good. One is Extraordinary Attorney Woo, which is about a person with autistic spectrum disorder and how she becomes a great productive person, how she makes herself a great productive person. The other one is What's Wrong with Secretary Kim, where a person experienced trauma disorder in childhood, and again, how she makes herself, in spite of very bad luck. Her mother is a criminal. Her father is an irresponsible rock player, and she makes herself into a very excellent person, excellent productive person. And I strongly recommend those two TV serials because that's a tradition that no longer exists in America. And the Korean TV series where people have the worst possible luck and do great things anyway is something that I highly recommend.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And then I would add, you mentioned Horatio. I would recommend people find those books. You can still find them, I think, mainly used bookstores, but they're available out there. And they're fantastic reads. They're so much fun and they're so good. They all follow the same kind of type of story. So you read a few of them and you pretty much figured all of them out, but they all are stories of somebody from bad circumstances, and I won't even call it luck because I don't consider bad circumstances luck. Bad circumstances, it just is what it is. Not everything that is what it is luck. And then make something of their life and become, in Horatio, they always become productive marvels, and they do amazing things. And it's really tragic and says a lot about the state of American culture that those kind of stories don't are not common in America TV or in American novels anymore. And they were primarily targeted at young adults and to help model their life for them, in the future. So they were morality plays, if you will, for young adults.
And the Horatio
Yeah,
Alger
1962 Miracle Worker, of course, is a, talk about bad luck. Think about how, she was born with no senses, right, except the sense of touch, and what she makes of her life and how she can overcome that. That is one of my favorite movies of all time, 1962, The Miracle Worker. Highly encourage you guys to find it. Yeah, Daniel, you were saying something?
Yeah, the Horatio Alger books and others that are past copyright are often available for Kindle free or almost free, $1 or $2 off of Amazon. And
Oh, great. Great. Yep. Definitely go and find those. Thank you, Adam. Jennifer.
Isn't what you would call luck really just it's a value judgment and evaluation? Because whatever happens, happens, and either it's good for you or not. And the same thing that happens can be good for someone else and not for you. Like let's say I shoot the criminal. Well, it's good for me that I got him. It bounced off the wall and got him. It's good for me. It's not good for him. Well, actually it is because he's criminal. He needs to be shot. But you know what I mean? Isn't that all it is just value judging something?
No, I mean, yeah, but everything's in that sense. So there is an evaluation associated with it, but it's saying it was caused not by my effort. The cause is not determinate, right? It was random chance, although it's not random chance, of course, but it's random chance. So it's a particular type of event versus, I pointed the gun and I'm a good shot and I shot him through the eyes versus I just pulled the trigger randomly and it somehow bounced off the wall and hit him. One is luck and one is ability. One is caused and one is not, in a sense. Unintended consequences.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you what you thought of Pierre Polivier or whatever in Canada. Do you know anything about him?
Yeah, I mean, he looks really good.
Seems better to conservatives here if you're
Yeah,
conservative.
he's certainly better than conservatives here, and he looks pretty good. But that's been true of conservatives in Canada in the past, right? I remember in the past, the conservatives always looked great in the opposition, and then when they got in power, they were like, nothing. And I worry that happens here. That is, I hope he lives up to how good he looks, on TV and on YouTube and on his speeches. I hope he lives up to it when he gets into power. Power for so many of these politicians, I don't know, there's something about the burden of responsibility, and now they have to become kind of somewhat left because I don't know why. Because morality kicks in. That's
He's
why.
still going to be statist. He'll still be
What's that?
statist. There's no question.
Yeah, and then
He'll
the
still
question
be
is how
statist.
statist will he be, right? And so, but yeah, getting rid of Justin Trudeau would be great. I do think that Donald Trump's suggestion of turning Canada into an American state is a good one. I think it's a win-win-win-win. Everybody wins from it. I don't think it should be one state. I think you have 5 provinces, or 4 provinces, or whatever it is. They can each be 10 provinces, even better. Make them 10 states. I think that's one of the few good things that Donald Trump has proposed. I'm a huge fan of turning Canada into an American state. Yeah, Mexico should be next. So I'm eager to turn Mexico into an American state too. So yeah.
How much are you kidding? Completely?
0.
Oh.
I mean, I'm kidding because it's not going to happen. But in terms of if you gave me the option and I thought the option was realistic, certainly Canada, without hesitation, I would turn Canada, make Canada part of America.
A lot of people would say you shouldn't do that because they're going to vote left.
Yeah, well, that's why immigrants. That's why
I disagree.
They don't want immigrants, and that's why it's all the rest of it. They would secularize the right? Their right is more secular than our right. So, there are a lot of good things. We'd have think about all the natural resources. Think about the people, how smart they are. I mean, they come to America, they do really well here. Think of how many objectivists we'd get. I mean, half the objectivist intellectuals are Canadian, and I mean, it's and they have a better educational system. They don't quite have Dewey. They have the Dewey Light.
We need the First Amendment too. It's necessary.
Canada needs a First Amendment, so they'd gain that. Canada would become better instantaneously. It's win-win-win. And then Mexico is a little more difficult. Maybe you'd have to govern it as a colony for 10 years to root out all the violence and the corruption, and only then integrate it into the United States. But and everybody would freak out then, because think of the ethnic, racial dilution that would happen to America if Mexico became part of the United States. We'd have a lot of people with Spanish heritage, and they're not quite European. I don't think Spanish heritage counts as Europe. Right.
If we get Canada, we get poutine. Do you know what that is?
Yeah, I mean, we do get Quebec. That is the one downside. The one downside is you do get Quebec. It is a problematic province.
They want to be their own country anyway, so
yeah, maybe we can spin them off. Maybe we can give them to the. I'm not sure who would take them. The French might take them.
Right.
Yeah. I've suggested basically. I think basically North America should be one country, or maybe the U.S., Canada, and then there'd be a Central America country. Basically, you should unite Mexico with Guatemala all the way down to Panama. And then there should be 2 South American countries. There should be all the Spanish-speaking countries and Brazil. I generally think there are too many countries in the world, not too few. So, and it's about time the European Union became a federation. So, just to get everybody riled up before New Year's. All right. Emmett and Dina.
Diane.
Yeah.
Diane, sorry.
So I had a quick factual thing. I just wondered if you could remind us of the pan-cancer test, the all-body screen company that you recommend.
Yes, I will be doing that in a week and a half. It's called Human Longevity.
Sorry.
Human Longevity. They have clinics in San Diego and San Francisco, so South San Francisco, close to the airport, and they do a whole body scan. They do all the blood tests. They do a echocardiogram and a bunch of tests, CT, calcium score. You basically spend from 8 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon there to get everything done. They treat you. You get your own little room and nice clothes and good. They give you breakfast. They treat you as a VIP, so it's really well done. It's expensive, but if you sign up, ask for the Yaron Brook discount. They might give it to you. I don't know. They used to give a Yaron Brook discount. But it is, and then you have access to a doctor for basically for the whole year. So you have access. Then they can't, I don't think they function as your primary care physician, but they can certainly, they'll send blood tests for you and they'll keep track of your progress. And if there are any issues that come up, they'll tell you what to do and which specialist to go see, and they'll get in touch with your primary care physician and work with them. So they're very active, particularly if there's an issue and a problem. But the whole idea is to catch anything early. Generally, early detection is half the battle, or more than half the battle. It could be 90%, particularly with cancer. Cancer is very treatable if you catch it early. If you catch it late, there's very little that can be done. But if you catch it early, there's a lot that can be done. And a lot of their focus is on cancer. The other thing you can also do, it's an add-on price-wise, which I do, is you do the cancer blood test. I think it's called the GRAIL blood test, where they take some blood and they screen for 50 cancers. They screen the blood for proteins that carry a DNA that they've identified with whatever. As if I understand the science, they scan for proteins that are the result of a cancer. And
that's the Gallery test.
What's that?
Gallery?
GRAIL. GRAIL.
Okay, because I've been looking at one called Gallery, GALLERI, which is
Okay, so I haven't.
$1,000 and does at least 50 cancers. It's the same. It sounds like the same thing.
It could be that one is the name of the company and one is the name of the test.
Oh, it could be.
Or it could be that I am mispronouncing the test. So it could be the same test. I don't know. I always thought it was GRAIL, but let's see. Here's the cancer test. It looks like the same thing, and it is a different name. Let's see if there is a GRAIL cancer test. Isn't the internet amazing?
Yes.
Indeed.
There is a GRAIL test as well. So there are two companies that do the same thing.
Right. So the Gallery test is $949, $50 off if you do it by New Year's Eve. But it does screen for 50 plus types of.
I think GRAIL, my guess is they're the same test, but GRAIL is also just under, last year was just under 1,000. It was around 900.
Right.
This year, I think I was told it's more like $1,200. So I don't know if they've raised the prices, or maybe my company's taking a cut. I don't know. But I can see there's a GRAIL
It is
website.
the same. I see it's the same. It's the same.
It's the same one. It's
Yeah,
just two different companies doing the same thing.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
I
Yes,
think
I
GRAIL is
do
the
that
name of
as
the
well.
company, and GRAIL is the name of the company, and Gallery is this particular test.
Okay, cool. Okay. And there are going to be more companies that do this and more types of tests, because it's a huge new area. Early cancer detection through blood is something that a lot of companies are working on, and I think that we'll see a lot of growth there. What else can I tell you about this, about human longevity? So you assign a doctor who will, go through all your bloods. Oh, they also do a genetic. They run your, like a 23andMe, they'll run your genes through. They won't give you ancestry, but they'll give you what's important, which is all your susceptibility to diseases, whether you're inclined to particular cancers or inclined towards, I don't know, diabetes or whatever it happens to be. You'll know where you are genetically as well, which is incredibly valuable. So you can change your behavior to adjust. Or, for example, if you're susceptible to certain cancers, you can screen for those cancers in particular, like colon cancer. You can get one of those wonderful colonoscopies more often than once every 10 years. I have to do one every 3 years now because I have the gene for it. So, God, it's awful. I know. So, so sometimes the genetic information is not stuff you really want to get, but better. I still believe knowledge is better than not knowing.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, always. All right, good. Yeah.
Is it all right to ask the next
Sure.
thing? Okay.
Sure.
So I had a thought of a series that you might do for the Yaron Brook show, which is a compare and contrast series.
Okay.
And it would be like the rules for life, so that I can imagine a variety of different shows and do a compare contrast between altruist virtues and values and those of objectivism. You might do something like for how, what is it, 3:16 Corinthians or something like that. The love is patient and kind verse of in the Bible for love versus the objectivist concept of love. And so those might be a good. What do you think of that? And
yeah,
how,
no, I think that I like that. I did that. I did it for the 7 Deadly Sins.
Mhm. Right.
I did a show on the 7 Deadly Sins and what the objectivist. So yeah, I mean, I could look at different virtues. The Christians are pretty vague about their virtues. That's a challenge, right? It's like love and sacrifice, but it's very vague. It's not very concretized other with the cross and a
humility
few.
versus pride. That
Yeah,
might
humility versus pride. And then
It's not that vague. It's just you're not doing enough of it. That's the one concrete.
you can't do enough of it. That's right, because you would die if you did. So that's right. That's a good point. And it's probably that I wasn't raised with those explicitly. I probably don't know enough of the examples of how it comes through. Because in Judaism, it's like, it's very, it's not, it's a Ten
Do what
Commandments.
your mother tells you to do.
Yeah, you do what you're supposed to do. And the culture knows what you're supposed to do. So.
Cool. Thank you.
Right. Thanks, guys. Yeah, good luck with the human longevity. Let me know if you need me to put in a wood in there. I have a little bit of influence. I don't think I have much, but I have a little bit. I've sent a lot of people. They probably have over a dozen, maybe 15 people who've come to them from the Yaron Brook show. So I try to get them to become a sponsor of the show, and it hasn't happened yet. So money only flows in the direction from me to them, not from them to me yet. We're working on it. All right, let's see. Jacob.
Yeah, that's a horrible trade imbalance. You need to correct that with some tariffs you're on.
I know. I don't like this trade imbalance stuff.
But question on insurance, and it could be health insurance or say property insurance. If you know, say you were in a town and you know half the buildings have asbestos, or you have a grandparent that has a gene and there's a 50% chance to get it. Is it moral to take out insurance or to sell a property to another company that's just buying up 10 properties in the town without getting tested, and then testing it after you have the insurance or after the property was sold? Or because you don't know for sure, so you're not lying.
Yeah.
You know that you could take a test, and you have insider knowledge because
there's always insider knowledge. I mean, that's just the reality whenever you buy insurance. If the an insurance company doesn't ask, then I don't think it's immoral not to volunteer the information. With health insurance, they're not allowed to ask.
Yeah.
So even if you told them, it wouldn't make any difference because they're not allowed to take that information into account. So I don't think with health insurance, it's certainly not immoral. So
what about like a life policy? Because say you have a 50% chance of having a gene that 15x's your cancer risk.
So they would have to ask for it, right? They should ask, and it's not that hard for the insurance company to come up with a question that says, do you have any genetic risk factors? And then you wouldn't lie.
Yeah, but you want to know because you haven't tested yet.
The insurance company will either demand that you do a genetic test or not, right?
Okay.
So the burden is on them to get the information they think is relevant. It's not on you to provide the information you believe is relevant to them.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah, because I know you went back and forth with someone a week ago or 2 weeks ago about deceiving insurance by not telling, and I didn't know if it was deception by not doing the test yourself.
Yeah, the context there was that you knew and they asked and you lied to them because you felt it was okay to lie to them because you were being coerced to buy the insurance.
Is it different if it's only like
withholding
$100
information
test?
is different than voluntarily providing false information.
Okay.
Withholding information, you are not responsible for providing all the information. You're selling at, it is the responsibility of the buyer. Buyer beware is real. It is the responsibility of the buyer to ask the right questions.
Okay. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah. All right. Daniel.
So by several standard measures like Shiller's index, the market might be overbought. What's the Brook index? Is the market overbought, and is the Fed going to step in, or the federal government in general, and try to fix things?
So I don't think they're going to try to fix things. If anything, Trump is going to encourage low interest rates and encourage prices to go up. He will not. He's not in the mode of fixing things, and I don't think Powell will act that independently. I suspect interest rates are heading down, in spite of the fact that the market is saying they shouldn't be heading down, in the sense that the 10-year bond is going up. Yield on a 10-year bond is going up. I don't know. I mean, I don't have an index. It strikes me that 2 years in a row for the S&P 500 to go up over 20% is a lot, given that the economy is not growing that much. The fact that is almost all dominated by 7 stocks that are driving much of that increase, I'm skeptical about, particularly when you think about Tesla, right? Really, is Tesla that valuable?
A lot of speculation,
a lot of
not
data.
actual profits, right?
Not just based on profits, but based on, because Amazon didn't have profits for a long time, and but it grew into it. But competition for electric vehicles, I know everybody views Tesla as a data company, but okay. And then, has anybody monetized AI yet? Do they know how AI will be monetized?
NVIDIA has, yeah.
Yeah, NVIDIA has, by selling the buckets and the yes. So, but the big tech is investing trillions of dollars into data centers when they don't know exactly what the model is for monetizing all this. I'm not saying they're wrong, because they're really, really smart, and they're smarter than I am. So I don't know that they're wrong, but it does seem to me like the market is. It's like everything has to go right for these companies. Everything, no hiccups, no bumps in the road, no challenges. The business model has to work perfectly for these valuations to be legit. And I've never seen that actually happen. And then, maybe quantum computers are coming, and then the world changes. But yeah, the valuation seems rich. I'm not investing in tech stocks right now. I wouldn't invest in tech stocks right now. But on the other hand, God, I've missed all the big spikes in my history, right? So I've also, for that reason, missed the big downtrends, but I've missed the big spikes. I don't see the valuations matching up to reality unless from here on out everything is just going to go perfectly, no crises, no problems, no mistakes by the Fed, no mistakes, tariffs don't happen, so it seems too good to be true.
And gold was up, what, over 20% before Trump got elected? I mean, it's an
I don't even know how to evaluate the meaning of gold anymore, gold prices. I don't know what it's supposed to tell me. So it's supposed to tell me that inflation is coming or has already happened, because before the previous inflation, gold didn't go up. It took it a while to go up once inflation hit.
Yep.
It's very hard to figure out what is gold actually correlated with. I think it's correlated with kind of a variety of end of the world scenarios, or it's correlated with a bunch of different things, and that correlation changes over time. But it's not a simple correlation like we thought it used to be. It's just inflation. It's an inflation hedge. And then of course there's Bitcoin, and God help us, I have no idea what that is. Means.
What do you tell your friends when they ask about Bitcoin? Because they heard me long ago say it's a store of value, but I wouldn't get involved. and they say, hey, but it's over 100,000. Shouldn't I have bought it? Shouldn't I be in it?
Yep. 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 And yeah, but so anyway, yeah. Seems rich right now.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Ryan.
Yeah, I was watching my annual edition of Die Hard, the 1988 Christmas movie with Bruce Willis with my two sons. And, it really occurred to me this year, especially watching it with two teenagers, just how virtuous this movie is. It really, believe it or not, like John McClane is a true hero. He's pursuing his values. He constantly implores himself to think and to outsmart the terrorists or the thieves in the movie. And he has no hesitation to use force and to kill the people who are threatening his life and his values. Is there something about the 80s cinema that really resonates with objectivist principles, and why that era was so, had so many heroes that were, aligned with these values?
Yeah, I don't know why, but it was a pretty amazing period. I mean, maybe it's the era, the post Ayn Rand era, right? I mean, she lived into the 80s and died, but you've got I think the Aliens, second Alien movie, which is fantastic from that perspective. Even the Terminator movies, both one and two, are from that era and are really, really good. You've also got I was thinking of another movie that had Last of the Mohicans, which is one of my favorite movies from that era as well. There was just a lot of good individualistic, kind of reason-based. So America was very optimistic in that era. That was Reagan. Reagan changed kind of the culture, the attitude. There was this can-do attitude, positive attitude, entrepreneurial attitude. So Reagan had something to do with it.
I was only 10, but it seems to me that even the idea of capitalism was not,
Yeah,
it wasn't
that was
negative.
definitely Milton Friedman and Ayn Rand and Hayek, and there's no question about that. And Reagan giving it voice, although not living up to it, but giving it at least voice. There was a whole different attitude. I was in my 20s, and I thought the world was awful, and I thought it was anti-capitalist, and everybody was, yeah, and the Atlas Shrugged was happening before my eyes. But I didn't have perspective, so I didn't realize how bad the 70s were, and I didn't realize how bad things were going to get. But it turns out the 80s and 90s were really, really good from many perspectives. And Silicon Valley was driving it, some of it, right? All these entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley, that created a certain vibe to it all. Yes.
Great classic rock music.
What's that?
Great classic rock music from the 80s.
I think the great classical rock music was from the 70s, wasn't it? I don't know. I dropped out of rock music in somewhere in the early 80s and spent the 80s listening to classical music. So I really don't know anything about 80s music. So the last remnant I have is 70s, is the 70s.
It was kind of like a cheap thrill, but at least at least people were trying to get a thrill.
So movies today are so bad that I actually, I watch these old movies with my kids, and they actually acknowledge that the stories, the writing, the plot from 30 years ago are just so superior to today. They can't figure it out.
Well, and then if you actually watch movies from 70 years ago, you'll see how much better they are. Particularly the comedies. Comedies are so much better because today comedies are basically geared towards the lowest common denominator and the assumption that everybody is stupid and vulgar, and those were smart comedies.
Thanks.
Sure. Alejandro. Can't hear you. There's something wrong with the connection. Try again. Hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
Now that's much better. Yes.
Oh, yeah. So I wanted to say that I applied for a scholarship to the Ayn Rand Con because of you. So I want to say thank you. So we'll see if I get in.
Good.
But
Yeah. So my question actually was about this idea of moral and practical.
Yeah.
And so, for example, I'll give this example I've been thinking about. The Thai government and the Singaporean government say it's very practical to basically, anytime someone commits a crime, they basically like whip them and cane them. And they say that works very well. Like, we have no crime here. But that seems, I think you've called it like barbaric or like primitive. But they would say you may have moral qualms about it, but we're the crime-free society. And put aside, I guess, like smoking marijuana, like real crime. So maybe your thoughts on that.
Yeah, look, in terms of real crimes, that is crimes of theft of property or crimes against somebody's body, violence. I'm pretty open to pretty harsh penalties. I mean, bread and water, and for some people, throw away the keys. So I have some sympathy for that. The problem with the Thai government and the Singaporean government is how expansive their laws are on what they consider crime and how many things they consider criminal, and therefore how much human freedom they restrict. And when you do that, I think there are practical consequences. That is, maybe you don't have crime, but maybe you also are now in a culture that has very little innovation and very little entrepreneurship and very few people who are willing kind of to think outside of the box because they're not sure exactly, because they've been taught that there's this, anytime you're outside in this particular region, you get beaten up. I think there are other consequences to that kind of punishment. But I think the real problem there is that they apply it to things that are not real crimes. If they applied it only to murder and rape, I'm pretty open to a variety of different punishments for violent crimes that others might consider barbaric.
Yaron, it's like how many people aren't moving to Singapore because they have these kind of like crazy criminal restrictions. A lot more people would be willing to move there.
And often it's the risk takers and the ones who would do more. And Thailand is not exactly a success. I mean, Singapore, you could argue, is a successful place. They've done very well for themselves. Thailand, not so much. So I think there are consequences to that. I think what you project to the civilized world is a certain barbarism and a fear. And at the margin, some people avoid you, and the people who avoid you are people who you would otherwise want to engage with in terms of coming there and working. All right, Andrew.
Yeah. Do you sense that the technologists are gradually moving right? And if so, why?
Well, I think what's happened is two things. There was a certain movement right among technologists over the last few years, and I think it's primarily because of a rejection of woke, and they're like most people, thinking only in terms of two. You can either be right or left. So if I'm rejecting the left because of woke, I have to be right, and I think they have that perspective. So I think that's one. But second, I think there was also always a cadre of people in Silicon Valley who were free market, if you want to call it that, right in that sense. But they never had the courage to speak up because they never thought it was urgent. They never thought it was important. And the whole woke phenomena, starting with that, you remember starting in, was it 2016, 17, when that engineer at Google wrote that letter about women programmers or whatever and got fired for it. They just saw the consequence of what happens when woke happens, and they decided to speak up. And then once one or two speak up, then others gain the courage to speak up as well. And that's what you've seen in Silicon Valley, is people gaining the courage to speak the way they did before. Right? The way what they thought.
Do you think also you think another contributing factor would be what the government did over COVID? Like Facebook seemed, for example, to Zuckerberg take that, like, government intrusion. I was surprised.
Maybe a little bit, but I don't think that's the main thing. I think, look, Zuckerberg, I think, has always been relatively free market, but he never had the guts to talk about it and to stand up for it. And he played along with the government and felt the consequences of playing along. And then he saw an opening, an opportunity, because it become more popular in the culture, to stand up against the government, and he took that opportunity. So again, they're all a little pragmatic. So once they reject woke and they adopt kind of more the right, then they tend to embrace more things of the right because that's where the right is, and they want to fit in now with a new group. There's a certain ideological second-handedness there, unfortunately. So it's a combination of things.
That's very interesting. Oh, I just want to say one thing. I thought Elon Musk's tweet was really good about like racists in the Republican Party and how like that's. I thought that was really laudable. That tweet.
I'll talk about it tomorrow, but then he tweets other stuff that then undermines all that. So he's a interesting character. All right, we are going to go through the super chatters. We've got $2 to $5 super chatters. We'll do those quickly, and then we'll call it a day. So thank you, everybody. All right, let's do this. Thoughts on Jay Bhattacharya at the NIH director? I mean, mixed. I think there's certain virtues he has. He's obviously a thoughtful scientist. On the other hand, I was not impressed with his early empirical studies around COVID that he did in 2020. I think it was late 2020. Just the statistical rigor in which we did the studies was just not there. And I was disappointed in that. There are a few other things where I thought he could have been a little clearer. So, if he brings a kind of a independent spirit to the NIH, there is a whole movement now to rethink how we do clinical trials, to also rethink how the NIH gives grants to medical researchers. I think if he embraces that and is willing to really change things for the better, and I think there's a lot of change that can happen there, then he'll be great. If he's captured by RFK and the cynicism and skepticism of science and big pharma and all of that, it will be bad. I hope he's better at statistics than what he showed in the early days of COVID. There was some stuff he did just not good. I remember criticizing it on the show, looking at a critique of it. He tried to estimate how many people had COVID already, and it was just shoddy statistics, if I remember right. So I'm mixed, but I do think he's not as bad as RFK. He's not as bad as some of the other nominations there. And there is the potential, at least, for him to shake up things that need to be shaken up. Even within, even for us who reject that the government should have any role there, but at least if the government is going to fund science, it should do it more rationally than the way it's doing it right now. All right, not your average algorithm. At what point will the objectivist movement be able to violently overthrow something? I don't know. I don't know if ever. I don't know if that ever will be or should be a goal, but I don't know. At a point where we think you can win. So you'd have to have a significant portion of the population willing to fight with you. And win, and then know that when you win, good stuff will happen. If you win and some crazy right-wingers take over instead, that's not a good outcome, not worth fighting. James, did you see Elon Musk's aggressively pushing back against MAGA's H-1B visa position? Yes. I'll talk about that tomorrow. Tomorrow's show will be dedicated to that. James, it seems the left wants DEI hires based on race, while the right wants DEI hires based on nationality and race. If you really scratch the right surface, it's all about whites. It's all about them wanting whites to have the opportunities. So yes, they're all racists. I agree. Again, we'll talk about that more tomorrow. Liam, will the NHS be privatized in the next 50 years? 50 years. I don't know. I have no idea. I'll give the odds of it being privatized in the next 50 years at 25%, which is high. Clark, one of the signs of a collapsing civilization is starting blaming things on Jews. Yes, sadly, that is true. And here we are. We're right there. both on the left and on the right. Michael, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. Elon Musk. I think that's I think that's absolutely true. Absolutely true. Elon has some great one-liners, and once in a while once in a while you want to just hug the guy or give him a fist pump or whatever it is you do, right? You want to support him. Liam, are you watching season 2 of Squid Games? No. Unless somebody tells me I should, I'm not going to. I watched season 1 because it was a cultural phenomena. I want to know what it was about. I hated it. It was awful. It was horrible. It was disgusting. Unless season 2 becomes a cultural phenomena, I'm going to avoid it. What brings you to the Bay Area? My medical exam is at the San Francisco office on Wednesday that week, the 8th, I think it is. Nate, mass migration is not always good, especially from countries that have bad cultures like India, Middle East, and Africa. That's how you end up with areas like Dearborn, Michigan. They get to vote. Yeah, but it turns out that more and more people from cultures that you don't like voted for Donald Trump. So maybe for some of you that's a good thing. I don't buy that, but for all questions migration, including mass migration, come to my show on Monday. And India, God, I mean, look at what Indians have succeeded in achieving in this country. They're the most successful national group of any in terms of, and they're way out. Their income is way higher, the wealth creation way higher than native-born Americans, and they've done amazingly well. So
they're stealing all these spelling bees from Americans.
What's that?
They said they're stealing all these spelling bee championships from Americans.
That's right. That's right.
It's amazing how some issues are just litmus tests, and it unveils who a person is underneath.
Yep. I mean, there's something about the Middle East we can talk about. There's something about Islam we can talk about, but to just blame Indians, that's ridiculous. And look how many Indians are here in America, and look how successful they are. Look at Vivek, look at Nikki Haley, look at JD Vance's wife, and look at the CEOs of these major tech companies. Look at all the startups. It's just bizarre to me. How those immigrants could just be dismissed. All right, Enric, the Outer Space Treaty of 1967 disavows national claims of celestial bodies to colonize and exploit space. That shouldn't the treaty be abolished? Yes. Or the United States should just withdraw from the treaty, which is what should be done. A lot of treaties the United States has signed, it should withdraw from. A lot of them. WCNZ, I think we need to cancel luck until someone figures out what it even is. Well, we know what it is, but we should stop thinking it's that significant in human affairs. I.C. Saracen, would Ayn Rand's emphasis on individualism and reason lead her to be critical of the collectivist and theocratic elements of the ancient Jewish society? Yes, absolutely. I mean, she was critical of collectivism and the whatever theocratic within Jewish society. So, absolutely. I think the implication there is I'm not, and that's bizarre. If you know anything about me, I'm massively critical of Israel as collectivistic, of Jews as collectivistic, of Israelis as collectivistic. Is why the main reason I left Israel, and I'm hugely critical of the theocratic elements within Israeli society, and hope that they are suppressed politically and advocate for complete separation of church and state from Israel. And yet, I know enough and can identify the good even in places that are very mixed to still support Israel in spite of all of that. And you should too. And Ayn Rand did. All right, Jay just came in with $50. All right, let's see. You're missing on the value of Tesla. Oh God, these are the kind of arguments I track the engineering and corporate economic exponential rate of change rather closely. Here's a category list: AI-based general autonomy of cars and humanoid robots, 2 to 3 orders of magnitude. I'm not going to argue with you, Jay. I mean, as I'm not an engineer, I don't track this closely. Given the valuation, I do track finance. The valuation doesn't make sense to me, even if that is true. And I still don't, you still have to monetize all that. And maybe 5 years from now, Tesla will just monetize everything and take over the world in terms of how much money they make. They will have to in order to justify the valuation they have right now. I just don't see it. And that assumes no competition. It assumes no shortcuts by people who follow. You can make huge leaps and bounds technologically, and then people can copy you and catch up very, very quickly. You see that in China. You see that in Japan. And I just don't see the valuation justifying the great engineering. Not to undo the great engineering. I don't think the valuation. And if Trump does what he promised, which is get rid of fuel standards and get rid of subsidies for EVs, and if you really got rid of subsidies for EVs, all the subsidies for EVs, then I don't know where Tesla goes at that point, because Tesla is a highly, highly, heavily subsidized automobile. And maybe they sell robots instead. But again, valuation does not equal good company, right? You could have a good company that's overvalued, and a good company overvalued, and a good company that's correctly valued. Good company and valuation in the market are not the same thing. So Tesla could be the best company in the world and be overvalued, and those both statements can be true. All right, guys. Thank you, Jay. Really appreciate the support. Thanks to all of you. I will see you tomorrow, 2 p.m. East Coast time, and Immigration Show on Monday. Have a great weekend. And of course, don't forget, year-end show December 31st, 1 p.m. East Coast time. Talk to you soon.
Bye, Ron.
Bye.